Hello and welcome to CYC News for the 12th of July 2020 and the 5th of Abib 17:36 am. I'm Samantha Kazon. In today's headlines, Melbourne returns to lockdown as cases surge. The US is out of World Health Organization. China is the greatest threat to the US, says FBI director. The UN says blatant war crimes committed in Idlib battle. The UK to resume Saudi arms sales after humanitarian review. WHO says airborne coronavirus transmission cannot be ruled out. Why Barcelona manager Quique Setien's time is running out. But first, staying here in Australia, where 5 million Melbourne residents have been told to stay home for 6 weeks amid a surge in coronavirus cases. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews announced the lockdown midweek after the state saw 191 new infections, its highest daily number since the pandemic began, until a new record of 288 was set on Friday. Mr. Andrews said, "We are on the cusp of something very, very bad if we don't take these steps. I don't think a sense of complacency has crept into us as we let our frustrations get the better of us." The state's borders with neighbours New South Wales and South Australia are now closed once again. Victoria has been easing restrictions before the surge in the past 2 weeks. It now has hundreds of active cases, while other Australian states and territories continue to report only a small number of new infections. Under the new restrictions, which came into effect on Wednesday, people will be required to remain home and will only be able to leave for essential reasons, such as work, exercise, and shopping for food and other necessities. The lockdown covers only Melbourne and an area to the north called the Mitchell Shire, but the state as a whole has been scaled off from the neighbouring states of New South Wales and South Australia. Police and the military will be stationed at border crossings and patrol the vast borders with drones and other aircraft. To the United States now, and President Donald Trump has formally moved to withdraw the country from the World Health Organization. The president made his intentions clear in late May, accusing the WHO of being under China's control in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. Despite calls from the EU and others, he said he would pull out of the UN agency and redirect funds elsewhere. He has now notified the United Nations and Congress of his intentions, although the process could take at least a year. Stefan Dujarric, spokesman for the UN Secretary General, confirmed the US had notified it of its withdrawal, effective as of the 6th of July 2021. Senator Robert Menendez, the leading Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, also wrote on Twitter, "Congress received notification that POTUS officially withdrew the US from WHO in the midst of a pandemic. It leaves Americans sick and America alone." A senior US administration official said Washington had detailed the reforms that it wanted the WHO to make and engaged with it directly, but that the organization had refused to act. The official was quoted saying, "Because they have failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms, we will be today terminating our relationship." Joe Biden, who would challenge Donald Trump in the November presidential election, tweeted, "On my first day as president, I will rejoin the WHO and restore our leadership on the world stage." The US is the global health agency's largest single contributor, providing more than $400 million USD in 2019, around 15% of its total budget. The director of the FBI has said that acts of espionage and theft by China's government pose the greatest long-term threat to the future of the US. Speaking to the Hudson Institute in Washington, Christopher Wray described a multi-pronged disruption campaign. He said China had begun targeting Chinese nationals living abroad, coercing their return, and was working to compromise US coronavirus research. He said the stakes could not be higher. China is engaged in a whole-of-state effort to become the world's only superpower by any means necessary. In a nearly hour-long speech last Tuesday, the FBI director outlined a stark picture of Chinese interference, a far-reaching campaign of economic espionage, data and monetary theft, and illegal political activities using bribery and blackmail to influence US policy. The FBI director also mentioned a program called Fox Hunt, which he said President Xi Jinping had spearheaded and he said was geared at Chinese nationals living abroad seen as threats to the Chinese government. The program was originally started in 2015 to target people accused of corruption and has reportedly led to the capture of thousands of fugitives. However, reports of extraordinary rendition of political opponents by Beijing have multiplied in recent years. The Chinese government has defended this program in the past, saying it is part of a legitimate anti-corruption effort. On to Syria now, where UN investigators say pro-government forces and their jihadist opponents flagrantly violated the laws of war during the battle for Idlib province. According to a report, civilians endured unfathomable suffering when the Syrian military launched a campaign late last year to retake the area. They were subjected to indiscriminate airstrikes and ground shelling, as well as arrests, torture, and pillaging. The 29-page report released last Tuesday by the UN's Independent Commission of Inquiry on Syria covers the period from November 2019 to June 2020. The Commission of Inquiry's chairman, Paulo Pinheiro, said it is completely apparent that after more than 9 years, civilians continue to be indiscriminately attacked or even targeted while going about their daily lives. The report accuses militants from the jihadist alliance that dominates the opposition's stronghold, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a UN-designated terrorist group, of detaining, torturing, and executing civilians expressing dissenting opinions. Hundreds of civilians were killed before a ceasefire was agreed in March. Almost 1 million were displaced by the fighting, and many were forced to live in dire conditions, in overcrowded camps or open fields. Now the investigators warn a perfect storm is in the making, as the war-torn country faces both the coronavirus pandemic and an economic crisis. More than 380,000 people have been killed, and 13.2 million others, half of Syria's pre-war population, have been displaced inside and outside the country since an uprising against President Bashar al-Assad began in 2011. Over to Saudi Arabia now, where the UK is to resume arms sales despite concerns they could be used against civilians in Yemen, in violation of international humanitarian law. Sales were suspended last year after a legal challenge by campaigners. A subsequent review found isolated incidents of possible violations, but no pattern of non-compliance and no clear risk of future serious breaches. The campaign against the arms trade said it was a morally bankrupt move. It accused the government of rank hypocrisy after 20 senior Saudi officials were banned on Monday from entering the UK for their connection to the 2018 killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Labour said the government's mixed messages undermine the UK's claims to be human rights defenders. The UK's support for the Saudi-led international coalition in Yemen, which is backing the country's government in its battle against a long-running Houthi insurgency, has proven highly controversial. Thousands of people, including many civilians, have been killed in the 5-year conflict, while millions have been made homeless or left starving. The United Nations has verified the death of at least 7,700 civilians since 2015 and said 60% of these were due to bombing raids by the Saudi-led coalition, whose other members include the United Arab Emirates. To some health news now. And the World Health Organization has acknowledged there is emerging evidence that the coronavirus can be spread by tiny particles suspended in the air. An official said the airborne transmission could not be ruled out in crowded, closed, or poorly ventilated settings. If the evidence is confirmed, it may affect global guidelines for indoor spaces. So far, the organization has said that the virus is transmitted through droplets when people cough or sneeze. An open letter from more than 200 scientists had accused the WHO of underestimating the possibility of airborne transmission. Jose Jimenez, a chemist at the University of Colorado, who signed the paper, said, "We wanted them to acknowledge this evidence. This is definitely not an attack on the WHO. It's a scientific debate, but we felt we needed to go public because they were refusing to hear the evidence after many conversations with them." Professor Benjamin Cowling of Hong Kong University mentioned the finding had important implications. He said in healthcare settings, if aerosol transmission poses a risk, then we understand healthcare workers should really be wearing the best possible preventative equipment. And actually, the World Health Organization said that one of the reasons they were not keen to talk about aerosol transmission of COVID-19 is because there is not a sufficient number of these kind of specialist masks for many parts of the world. WHO officials have cautioned the evidence as preliminary and requires further assessment. And in sport, time is running out for Barcelona to maintain the La Liga title challenge. And the same could be true for manager Quique Setien's hopes of keeping his job. Setien was only appointed in January, but after just 19 games in charge, his future's already uncertain. As of Friday night, Barca were 3 points behind leaders Real Madrid, having played a game more with 3 rounds remaining. Collecting maximum points appears Barcelona's only option as they attempt to maintain their slim title chances. For Setien, the stakes are even higher. If his team fails to impress in the next 2 weeks, there is a chance he might not even last to see out the delayed conclusion to this season's Champions League when it resumes in August. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder that you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Samantha Carson from CYC Studios in Sydney, Australia. See you next time.